Welcome into another edition of the Intangibles brought to you by Arrowhead Addict. My name is Bryce Carter, and I am joined by my good friend, Christian Ainsworth. Christian, it is a beautiful day today to talk 2025 NFL Draft. I've already got goosebumps thinking about it. It's a great time to be here with you talking football.
Oh yeah, dude. This is like one of my most highly anticipated podcasts. Like this is what we're trying to build this channel around, or at least this podcast around, is draft coverage. And me and you are both really into it. So we've been looking at these prospects for weeks now, watching them as the weeks go by, get the updated overall grades and our rankings and stuff. So I'm really excited to see who you have where.
It's starting to feel real, man. I put on a sweatshirt, a hoodie for the first time the other day, hoodie and shorts, which is just like the best apparel for fall ever. Just get that warmth up top, but a little bit of breeze down below. It's football season and it's draft season, and we've got a lot of really fun stuff to talk about today. If you're not a big draft nut, don't go scrolling away. Hi, Baylor. You want to say hi? We have a guest appearance from my son. Oh, you got your digital camera? Okay, go see mom, okay? Thanks for coming.
No.
Night, all right?
Am I going? Can I watch it?
Okay, so there we go. Verdurium's daughter always comes on, so it's all good.
Leave it in, man.
All right, so if you're not a big draft nut, that's okay, because don't worry, we're not going to spend 45 minutes here breaking down quarterback prospects and players that the Chiefs don't need. All of our draft coverage here is going to be centered around the Chiefs and what they need. We'll talk about the class as a whole. We'll get into our top 25, and we're going to be talking about a few my guys that we have, some of our favorite players that we've watched so far. It's going to be a great show, so consider this Intro to Draft 101 for those of you guys. And also, this just makes watching college football so much more fun. There's some great games on this week. Georgia, Texas, that's going to be a heck of a matchup. There's going to be players all over the field that you want to watch for the Chiefs. It just makes watching that much more interesting. But before we get going with that, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. You know, I've got a funny story about Underdog. I opened up the app today because I don't know if you've seen what Thursday Night Football is today, but it's a real barn burner between Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler, which I'm so glad that I get to spend a couple of hours reviewing all 22 of that game for my work I do over FTN. But Bo Nix is... See, Underdog, they did this great thing. They give you these free picks. Bo Nix's prop is half a passing yard. And I had to think about it for a second because there's been a few halves where that's been a challenge for him to get. I think he had a half where he finished with -7 yards, but on Underdog, they have this calendar. They show you all the great picks that you can have, and there's a ton of easy picks for you to stack. Just go higher or lower. It's so easy. It's the greatest time of year again. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Win up to 1,000 times your money by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player's status. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head up over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with our promo code Arrowhead Addict, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em and entry, plus up to $1,000 in cash bonus when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Arrowhead Addict to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 years or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.mpcgambling.org. Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. Seriously, though, guys, get on the Underdog. You're going to need it for tonight's game. So let's talk big picture here a little bit about the 2025 draft. Christian, last year was a really special draft as far as the players in the class. It was probably one of those 1 in every 4 or 5 years draft where there was just a ton of top end talent available. And I remember sitting here on draft night of 2024 being like, why are they not making trades? Why is this so bland and boring? And I think we saw a lot of teams sticking and picking because there was so much top end talent that the trades would have had to have been huge. The compensation would have been for these teams to move around. This 2025 class, how do you think it stacks up compared to the 2024 class or maybe some other classes we've seen?
So I mean, really, obviously, it kind of depends on where you're at with certain prospects. And we're going to go through our top 25. So we're going to have like, pretty wide range of talent on these guys. But I would say there's no real like definitive, I guess you could say Travis Hunter is maybe like a can't miss prospect, like somebody who you can go out, you can get. Will Campbell's another guy where it's like, hey, 1-1, everybody knows where they're going. There's no real player like that in this draft, in my opinion. There are some great talents and a lot of guys who I would love to see in a Chiefs uniform, but there's like no, at least to me, no standout number one clear overall pick like there was last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is a pretty weak class. I would relate this a lot to kind of like the 2020 class, or no, much more like the 2022 class. That was the FAU draft for the Chiefs. That was a class that I felt kind of compared similarly, except this class has even less quarterback talent at the top. Will we see quarterbacks drafted at the top? I'm sure that those needs always get pushed up higher in drafts. But I don't see a ton of guys that I truly think are first round talents. Keep in mind, teams have to pick in the first round because they got to make the picks. That doesn't mean that there are 32 first round talents in each draft. Quite honestly, in this class, I see probably 10 to 12 first round talents, which tells us a lot of things. We're entering trade deadline season here. If the Chiefs are going to move a pick, this would be a good year to do it. Because quite frankly, I'm not sure that there's going to be a huge difference between player taken at 64 and player taken at 124. I know that sounds ridiculous because we have our draft charts memorized in our head and we do mock draft simulators where we're like, oh, we couldn't possibly get rid of this pick. But we have to remember that at some point, these teams, they have these talents tiered. And there is a difference between a first round talent and not a first round talent. A lot of times you're developing traits, you're taking players who have upside or floor and scheme fits. This is a draft that I think, especially one of the things that's defining about this class is there is a lot of really good talent that is, close to first round talent at non-premium positions. We'll get into it with running backs. There's some interior offensive line prospects. There's some linebackers. There's some safeties. I think we could see more than one safety taken in the first round. This is a draft that if you're a not positional value person where there's offensive linemen and corners and edges, there's not those positions aren't as deep. And I think that you will see teams reach on those players. So this is a year that I'm going to be a little less worked up. And it's still a little early, right? Like we might see some risers. There always are. But this is going to be a year that I'm not going to get as up in arms if the Chiefs take a player of a non-traditional position of value at the back end of the first round, a linebacker or something like that. And I know there are some purists out there that just like never. But at the end of the day, the goal is to draft good players. And I'll take the Lions draft from a couple years ago. I still don't really like that draft. That was the one in 2022 because they could have came away with like Jalen Carter and Christian Gonzalez. Instead, they came away with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. But those are good players. Would you rather have the upside? Sure, but draft good players, right? You'd rather have that than Tyree Wilson, who the Raiders have, who they took with like the 7th overall pick and I was like 3.5 sacks. So draft good players, always the mantra around here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's a difference. The Chiefs are like in this position where they're basically drafting like a round down, right? So like yes. Pick 32, pick 31. That's basically pick 34, pick 35.
Yeah, so, it's a second round pick.
Yeah, yeah. So they're drafting the people that they think will not be there at pick 64. And that means you're going to have to reach a little bit for some of the players. We saw it with FAU, who we know damn well wasn't going to make it to pick 64. Same thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire a few years ago, too. It's like, hey, we like this player, not traditional position. Let's just go ahead and reach out, see if we can get a hit on a good player, and then we'll see who makes it to us at pick 64. And what I like about the Chiefs in recent years is they've really valued those like high-end positions. And it's a lot different. You talked about like the depth of this draft and non-traditional players being valued very highly compared to, offensive tackle or, edge, wide receiver. We're at a point where the Chiefs are going to have to make a decision whether they want to reach for one of those guys or, get some actual talent on the roster. And if Brett Veach picks up a DB in the first round, you're probably never going to hear me complain. There are a few guys here that I would love for him to take. But
there's some good. This is a good corner class. It is a good corner class. Yeah. It's a good edge class. Those are probably the two positions that I feel are probably the strongest, especially top end wise. Now we'll get into it a little bit, but a couple of those guys have gotten hurt that I think might make some of those players more accessible for the Chiefs. Let's talk quarterbacks for a second. I know we said we weren't going to talk QBs, but they do define the first round, particularly in drafts. Couple of names here that I think are fringe first round guys. There will be quarterbacks taken in the first round. Christian, over under on quarterbacks taken in the first round, 2.5. Are you taking the over or the under?
I'm probably going to take the under on that. We saw a lot of quarterbacks taken last draft. There are a lot of teams like the Dolphins who maybe have a quarterback who they aren't super sure about in the future, but is still fairly good when he's actually active and on the roster. So guys like Shedeur Sanders, that's probably going to be one of two guys that gets taken, like him and Carson Beck.
Okay, so plant your flag in the ground here. Who's the first quarterback taken in this class?
Shedeur.
I know we're Shedeur. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Milroe, Jalen Milroe, quarterback, Alabama. We need to be sure to do that in this podcast here. We say the player and the school that they're from, just that way everyone knows. Milroe just has the traits that I think teams like. This is the Anthony Richardson projection, except he's already a better passer than Anthony Richardson. If you go back and watch that Georgia game where Alabama just ran out to a huge lead and then Georgia did storm back, but Milroe, he is the best athlete on the college field a lot of times. He has arm talent. He's the type of guy that like a guy like Shane Steichen, who's done some things with Anthony Richardson. He's an athletic ball of clay that can throw the ball really well. I think teams are going to, I just see a lot of teams talking themselves into his traits. And then, oh, by the way, he's played in a system that has, developed already a first round quarterback with DeBoer, who was from Washington, which was where Michael Penix, got drafted from. So I can see that. I do think Sanders probably first round pick. To me, like my comp for him's like Teddy Bridgewater, which I know a lot of people will probably cringe at that because like, oh no, like Teddy Bridgewater's not that good, or Teddy Bridgewater was a pretty good like QB prospect, and before that injury hit him, he was a different player. I'm gonna take the over on 2.5, but I think it's 3. Cam Ward from Miami is another guy that like he's older and plays with a certain chaos, but I think his ability to play off script will entice some teams, and he does have arm talent. He's just a little bit older. Some other names that might sneak up to the first round would be Garrett Nussmeier. He's the quarterback from LSU, more of a pro style quarterback. Carson Beck, you mentioned from Georgia. Mm-hmm. He's another guy. He's not had as hot of a year this year as he did last year. I think last year I would have probably pinned him to be the first overall pick in this class. Now, the fact that we're sitting here debating how many just tells you this is not a good thing for the Chiefs, right? If we're trying to come up with quarterbacks that are first round quarterbacks instead of like, oh yeah, this guy, he's a lock. That makes it harder for the Chiefs because they're not going to be drafting a quarterback in the first round. And you want as many teams not only drafting quarterbacks as much as possible, but reaching for those players. Something else that I'm a kind of a firm believer in is that there is no such thing as the late round QB. That does not happen very often. Everyone cites the Lamar Jackson example where the Ravens jumped back into the first round to draft a Lamar Jackson. That's not something we see very common. Most of the time, a player either goes in that first 10 to 12, like that Bo Nix line where the Broncos took him, or they fall out. See Drew Lock, see Will Levis. Those type of players where teams, if they don't think they're a first round pick, they're going to wait until day 2 to get them. There's just a huge difference between a day 1 and a day 2 quarterback. So I do think, we get a Shedeur Sanders, a Cam Ward, a Jalen Milroe, those type of players. And then some other teams will sit on their hands and take a Garrett Nussmeier or a Carson Beck. Riley Leonard is another name from Duke. I'd be surprised with him. Connor Wigman, Texas A&M, all those are names, but none of them are really planting their flag as the guy this year. And it definitely matters for the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah. And another name, Quinn Ewers. He's kind of a prospect people are throwing into that first round.
I did leave Quinn off, and I probably should have included him on here, especially if he goes and wins a national championship. Man, I don't know what. I just have this, and this is not a college football podcast, so we'll get moving. But don't you just see the Jalen Hurts Tua situation playing out for with Arch Manning in him? Because Quinn, he gets out of funk, man. And you just feel like in this expanded playoffs, there's going to be a game where they're struggling and they're going to push the Arch Manning button, especially with Sarkisian, who's been on the Alabama staff. And Arch Manning just has such a high floor as an athlete. Like he was clocked at like 22 miles an hour on GPS. I don't know. I'm just still curious to see how that plays out.
Oh yeah, well, and he doesn't really have Quinn Ewers. We're talking about doesn't really have like a defining characteristic of his game.
He's got a cannon. He's got a cannon for an arm.
Yes,
it really does, and he's mobile enough. But he gets so out of whack and alignment. It's like at sometimes like, all right, I'm going to do the sidearm thing for a little bit, and that's where the inaccuracy comes and some of the turnovers. He's improved this year, but he's also not been able to stay healthy. Like that's been an issue for him the last 2 years. So I don't know. He's another guy like Drew Lock. Like that's the guy that I think of with my comp with him, where you see the arm talent, but the inconsistencies are what's going to stop him from maybe being a first round pick. Okay, so real quick, before we get into the players, let's talk about the Chiefs' positions of need for the 2025 draft. Now, I know what you're saying. How could we possibly know what the Chiefs need? Because there's free agency to come and the trade deadline and all those things. So we're just going to go off of right now. Newsflash, I don't think that the Chiefs are going to solve all of these problems between now and then via free agency, given their salary cap situation, etc. So what would you say the top 3 positions of need in the draft are for the Chiefs coming up?
So there's a few arguments you can make here. And just for the sake of it, because I know you'll have a few that I don't list here, I'm going to say linebacker. I think that Nick Bolton is probably going to walk, no matter how much we would love for him to stay. So that's
your top position of need is linebacker.
No, just a top 3. Just a top 3.
Okay. We're not ranking. We're tiering.
No.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Grouping them up. I would say that defensive line help is especially going to be an issue. We don't know about Charles Omenihu, how he's going to come back from that injury. Guys like FAU. Hasn't really stood out as much as we'd like for him to have. And then wide receiver, you can make an argument for safety because Justin Reed's going to be leaving, but I think wide receiver is another one where, we don't know if we have Hollywood Brown back. Rashee Rice has taken a really nice step, but he's going to be out of the majority of the next season, whether it's because of this injury or because of the incident he had. I can't remember where it was, but the driving incident that happened over the summer. Yeah. Dallas. Yeah. And then Xavier Worthy, still kind of a big unknown. And then you have guys like Juju, Justin Watson, guys that, are established kind of veterans in the room, but we don't really know if they're going to be sticking around or if they can be relied upon, frequently. So yeah, wide receiver, linebacker, defensive line.
I agree with most of those. I definitely think linebacker is a need more than some people would like to acknowledge. However, to me, like top need is going to be defensive line, edge and interior defensive line. I've been shocked by how good the interior defensive line has been this year with the assortment of characters they have of Derek Nottie for year number 12. It seems like Mike Pennell, who is an aging player, but is playing some awesome ball. And also they're just getting so much out of Tershawn Wharton, who they're either going to have to pay or he's about to get himself a lot of money because he's really playing out of his mind. He's been playing out of his mind this year. I would say the need it just kind of comes down to what do you value? I think like they view Chris Jones as a building block and that they can put other guys around him. So I think the need at edge is probably the greatest when you factor in FAU hasn't developed. Omenihu is set to be a free agent. George Karlaftis isn't far away from free agency. I think they kind of did the same thing with Noah Gray. We're like, hey, we're just going to bridge the gap with the guy here. Mike Dana isn't elite. He's not great, but he's a ditch digger and every team needs those type of guys. So I think edge is probably the greater need. Then I'm going to go probably tackle. I think that you want to get out of the Juwan Taylor contract as soon as you can. That's just really not lived up to what you wanted it to be. The penalties are a problem. He's still inconsistent in pass protection. And, I had the thought the other day, like, would the Chiefs have been better off just keeping Andrew Wiley at his price point rather than paying Juwan Taylor? Probably. I think Taylor's probably the slightly better pass blocker, but Wiley was cheaper. And what could they be doing with that salary cap right now? I don't know. But tackle, I'm in on that because here's the thing. You've got Trey Smith and Joe Tooney possibly leaving. I'm not ruling out Kingsley or Wanya Morris kicking inside if needed. I know that they drafted Norzad. I know that CJ Hansen is still around, but if one of those guys needs to kick inside, they can. You basically need, like right now you have potentially a left tackle in Suamataia and Morris. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those guys lines up at right tackle next year or the year after. I just think that you need another body there. So tackle, especially because this draft, I don't see a ton, and we'll get into it. I don't really see a ton of tackles that are just like, oh, Joe Alt. Like this guy is a tackle, a definitive tackle. I see a lot of guys who might kick inside too. So just take a good offensive lineman, kind of like a Peter Skoronski type of situation where we're just going to take the best offensive lineman and find where he works. And then for me, probably number 3 is corner. Like you're going to have, I think that Trent McDuffie is going to be a priority for this organization. And I think that they value what he does. But you also have 3 corners who are all going to hit free agent, like 3 or 4 defensive backs all hit free agency at the same time because of when they're drafted with Watson, Williams, Cook, and Najee Johnson, right? So they need to start preparing for that. And they have some with Jaden Hicks, and they took Kamal Haddon, who's no longer on the team, but they need to bridge the gap there too. And I also think seeing what they were able to do with Snead and McDuffie, it's a reason to kind of build your defense around that. So those are probably the top 3 needs. Also notice those are all pretty valuable positions of need. I'd put wide receiver at number 4. I think that they can find some guys on day 2 and day 3 there that can bridge the gap, because even though we are kind of concerned about Rashee Rice and the injury and also the suspension, he will come back. And he still does have years of control. You hope for the next step in Xavier Worthy. And I think that they will kind of continue to do the mercenary thing at wide receiver like they've done the last couple of years with Hollywood Brown, with Juju Smith-Schuster, et cetera. So that's probably it. What would you say like are some positions that we're not really looking into that much, ones that we're not concerned about?
Quarterback, number 1, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Number 2, probably center. And then you're looking at like, man, I was going to say DB, but now that you mentioned that we have
safety,
all those guys.
Safety to me is one that like, I'm not that worried about safety. Like they've got Hicks, they've got Cook, they've got Connor. I'm just not particularly worried about
that like nickel role. I don't know if they want to move him back.
Well, yeah, but I see Hicks as such a like plug and play. Like I'm like, let's keep in mind, when we're talking about this, we're talking about day 1 and day 2 picks. If they draft a safety in day 3, I'm like, what the hell are they doing? There's virtually no position that they could take on day 3 minus like, I don't know, a guy who's never played football before or something that I'm going to be upset about, whether it's a quarterback, a kicker, a punter. Like, I don't know, like kicker and punter, maybe I'd have a little bit of issue with if they took, especially kicker since they have such a good one. But day 3 pick it's glorified UDFA. And the sooner you realize that, the less frustrated you will be with those things. But yeah, those are probably it. Like center,
tight end maybe too. We just locked up Noah Gray. We got Josh Wiley.
Yeah, and like here's the thing. I think that with tight end, there's reasons for you to say, hey, they should take one early because of the loss of Travis Kelce. Or you could also look at it and say, this is maybe you're not going to find Travis Kelce in the draft or really anyone who can replace him. So don't try to force the issue. Like don't reach on a tight end. We've not really seen a ton of first round tight ends pan out historically. I mean, like look at Dalton Kincaid. He's a decent player, but he's not really lived up to where he was taken yet. There's a lot of guys who are taken in with traits in the first round and pan out. So I could see that too. But definitely center, definitely quarterback. I think safety is one that's definitely towards the back end. But as you can see, there's a lot of other positions: interior defensive line, edge, linebacker, corner. We just kind of talked ourselves in and out of safety, tight end, running back. Like running back's another position that like you definitely probably want to spend a day 2 or day 3 pick on it. Spare me with the like bleeding heart. Oh, we could never draft a running back ever before round 7. That's not the normal. I know the Chiefs are making me look like idiots right now. The street UDFA and like, a guy that the Broncos cut and doing well. But part of that is because they have such a good interior offensive line. And that's not always going to be the case. Either way, they need some depth there. We can all agree on that. Because Carson Steele, I think you like some of the things you've seen from him, but he's not a building block for sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Before we get into our top 25, let's just kind of recap what picks the Chiefs do have in the upcoming draft here. So the Chiefs, this is as the standings sit. Don't get mad at me. I don't know what tiebreaker the Vikings have over the Chiefs, but via Tankathon, which is a great website for your draft pick needs, the Chiefs have pick 31, pick 63. So this is a first round, a second round. They have 2 third-round picks. Currently, the L'Jarius Sneed pick is pick 70. Keep rooting against the Titans. Pick 95 is the third-round pick. The Chiefs their own. Then they have pick 132, which is a fourth. Pick 167, which is a fifth-round pick. And then they have a seventh-round compensatory pick at 255. So they do not currently have a sixth-round pick. Again, with this draft, I'm not really that worried about that because I don't think that there's going to be like one thing that always bugs me. People say this all the time. Well, it's not a particularly good class, but it's got depth. That makes no sense to me. If it's not a good class at the top, what are people going to be doing? They're going to be reaching for talent and pushing up that talent, quote unquote, depth higher up, right? So that one doesn't make sense to me. If it's not good at the top, it's not good at the bottom. At that point, you're just throwing darts. You can't tell me that like of the 300 players that are there, there's 150 okay ones, and then there's just like 25 not that good ones at the top. That doesn't really vibe with me. To me, it's either a good class or it's not. Last year, I think, was a little bit unique where it was a very good class at the top, but there was a little bit less depth in day 2 and day 3. I think NIL probably plays a little bit in that. Like some guys who may consider going might stay because they can make a couple $100K staying there and playing college ball. But this year, like, yeah, like when it comes to trading wide receivers or whatever at the deadline, I'm not going to be as torn up about trading a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th round pick because I'm not sure how much it's going to be worth this year.
Oh, yeah. And I agree. Now is the time to trade. There are a few prospects that are still left, but, we'll see, obviously.
Okay, so to our top 25s we go. I want to play a little like Go Fish with you first before we do that, where I just kind of ask you some questions about your top 25. Some questions that I have for you, and I'll answer as well, too. Probably my first question is, who is your wide receiver 3? I'm assuming you have three or more wide receivers in your top 25.
Yes, yeah.
This is a question I've asked myself a lot. Who do I think is the 3rd best wide receiver? This class has 2 very clear guys at the top. Who is that 3rd guy for you?
So it kind of depends, right? I have Isaiah Bond up there as like my wide receiver 4, but he bumps to my wide receiver 3 if you don't consider Travis Hunter to be a wide receiver. And when I went through and I did my rankings, I looked at how good he was as a defensive back. I looked at how good he was as a wide receiver. Dude, he'd be a really good cornerback. He'd be a great receiver. I love Travis Hunter, who is from Colorado, by the way. So yeah, if we're not counting him, Isaiah Bond is my wide receiver. He is from Texas. He does a fairly good job. He's really like more of a zone beater. I see him running lots of slants, lots of in-breaking routes. And he's got like a really good style, like physical style of play. Like if you were going to like try to mock Rashee Rice for the first like 4 or 5 games of the season, like he might be your guy.
Yeah, I think I kind of forgot. Like we should probably talk about how we view Travis Hunter in this for a little bit. For me, in case you don't know, Travis Hunter is the cornerback wide receiver from Colorado. He plays both sides of the ball, an incredible athlete, plays an insane amount of snaps. The stamina and endurance he has, it's truly unlike anything we've seen in college football in quite some time. For me, I view him as a corner that can mix in on offense probably 10 to 15 plays. Like I think he's a guy that you want to get in the 2-minute drill or those type of things. I'm not sure that I want to dedicate him to truly being a wide receiver. I know some people view it different. So for me, I don't in my head factor him as one of the wide receivers because I think you're bringing him in predominantly as a defensive player. And I think that's where his traits translate a little bit better, especially considering his frame. He's a little thinner. I'm not sure that he's holding up to a full season at wide receiver where he's taking hits, especially with, if he's going to live over the middle of the field, which is a place that he's won quite often at Colorado. So correct answer, by the way. Good job. Wide receiver 3, Isaiah Bond. That's who I have. Isaiah Bond. Let's talk about him a little bit real quick. He's a guy that a lot of people are going to look at him and they're going to see he's out of Texas. A lot of people are going to see the Longhorn on the side of his helmet. They're going to see the speed and they're like, oh, it's just Xavier Worthy again. Different player. His predominant trait is speed, but this is the difference between Xavier Worthy, Deshaun Jackson, Tank Dell, those type of players where it's long speed down the field and like Zay Flowers. That's who I see when I see Isaiah Bond. Short area quickness, yak ability. Zay Flowers is very fast too. It's not that he's slow, but it's more of short area quickness with burst and cut ability rather than long speed. Tyreek Hill was just that freak that had both. Most guys don't have both. But I like Isaiah Bond. And again, all the things that we said about Xavier Worthy, as far as like plays in a pro style offense that reads defenses as he's playing, he's really popped off this year. I think that his jump in production along with Ryan Wingo, who's the other kind of predominant pass catcher for Texas. He's a guy that honestly, it would not shock me at all to see him come in with Worthy. They just kind of re-up on the speed and everything like that. I think he's kind of a blend of like what the Chiefs have used McCole Hardman for and probably a little bit more down the field than McCole Hardman. He's not just a manufactured touch yak guy. He can win as a receiver, but it's not the pure deep long speed like Worthy was.
Oh yeah, no, and that's why I really like him going over the middle of the field. He's a little bit more compact than Tank Dell.
He is. He's denser built than Worthy too. He's not that kind of paper mache build.
Yeah,
that,
well, and he's
that Worthy is.
Yeah, he's by no means like a complete receiver at all. But I do like some of the stuff that he does where he sits down, like they play a cover 2 and he just sits down there in the middle of the field and he's on like a slant across the middle and they just quick whip it out to him. And it's him versus 3 guys that he's got to, break their pursuit angles and take it to the house. Like he's absolutely capable of doing that.
Who is your first tackle?
Will Campbell. Out of LSU.
Okay. Same. Now, let me ask you this. Between Will Campbell, I'm going to assume that you probably have Kelvin Banks in your top 25. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah. He's my number 2 tackle.
And then Emory Jones, who's the right tackle for LSU. How many of those 3 guys do you think end up playing guard at the next level?
I mean, probably Kelvin Banks plays guard.
I think 2 out of the 3 probably do. I think that. So just in case you're wondering, we're talking about Kelvin Banks is the left tackle for Texas. Then Will Campbell is the left tackle for LSU, and then Emory Jones. Sorry, name escaped me. The right tackle for LSU. All 3 guys have guard bodies. Honestly, the way that they move, the way that the fluidity with them. They move pretty well on space. To me, I think that 2 of those guys end up at guard. I think Emory Jones is the most likely to end up at guard. And I think he'll be a really good guard. We've seen this with players like Tyler Smith, who's in Texas, who is like an all-pro caliber guard. Right now he's playing left guard or left tackle because Tyler Guyton's been benched, which is a conversation for another day. And then so Emory Jones is most likely, and I think the Texas left tackle as well could kick inside. I think that given what's on his plate, Will Campbell, I think that he'll get a chance to mix in at tackle and start at tackle, especially like the tools there. But man, one thing that jumps out to me is how upright he is in his stance. Like when I watched this, I was like, this is the guy. Like, are we sure this is the guy? Like, because when you watch him get off the line, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence. But he's just got length for days, big physical frame. Obviously, a ton of pass protection ability with the LSU offense. So I think that he will get the nod at tackle. One thing that I do like about all 3 guys, though, which, by the way, I'm not sure that any of these guys are going to be on the board at pick 31, 32 when the Chiefs draft. I do like the ability to kick inside. And the versatility there, I think it's nice. It's something that you'd like to have, especially in a year when the Chiefs are going to have some questions along the interior and probably still at tackle, right? So you bring in Emory Jones at pick 32, you project him at guard, but you work him in at tackle, and you just find your best 5. That's something that I could see making sense for the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah, and it really sucks, man. If anybody on this list deserves to be like 6'7", it's Kelvin Banks. Like, dude, he is so fluid. He's just such a small guy. I think ESPN has him at like 6'4", 320 pounds. Like that's a guard. That's Trey. That's smaller than Trey Smith. But he's just so good, man. Like there were so many like pass blocking reps that I saw him take, and I'm like, okay, smaller guy, probably not going to be as physical. Has to have really long arms. If he doesn't have long arms, he's not going to make it. And he just wins. He just wins reps. And like, if you're looking for a guy on the offensive line, you want a guy that just wins reps. And I don't care if he goes inside at guard or if he kicks out at tackle, he stays out at tackle. He's going to be a good player, man. He's just going to be a good player.
Okay. Last question I have before we get into actually reading it. How high do you have Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State?
So with all due respect to the other players on this list, I have him at number 5, or excuse me, at number 4 on my list. And I'm not saying that he's going to be an incredible prospect in the NFL. But at some point you have to give respect to a man who's averaging 10 yards a carry. Like at some point, go ahead.
Rank for me, this is just a fun kind of draft nerd exercise. Rank for me as a running back prospect, not as an NFL player. Rank Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. Go 1, 2, 3. Who do you think? I'll go first.
Okay,
to me, I give the nod to Saquon at first because Saquon did not have the vision that Bijan did. Like, I think Bijan's the more pure reader and runner, but Saquon just had the freakish ability that, like, he could do things wrong and then right the wrong because of his athleticism. There's just a certain chaos, like a Kenneth Walker chaos, who's running back for the Seahawks. But I just thought, like, Saquon's obviously the freakish ability, the strength, the pass catching, the game-changing speed, but he had the ability with his athleticism to do the wrong thing and then somehow still do the right thing. The no, yes. Then Bijan, like, I thought Bijan might be the best pure runner of the ball, those three guys, as far as see hole, hit hole, move, fluid, just so smooth, especially with the outside zone. Genty, to me, I love Genty as a prospect. The frame, him being 5'9", is a little concerning. I do think that there's a little, like, when I watch him, I see a little Maurice Jones-Drew, who's like all-time favorite Madden player of mine, where it's just like a little ball of power that you like. Man, when you watch people tackle Ashton Genty, you do start to wonder, like, hey, is this rigged for like gambling? Like, why just tackle the dude? Right? Like, but he's so explosive. The broken tackle numbers are so good. He's averaging like 5 yards after contact. It's insane. And then he does have enough long speed. Like, I see a little Kareem Hunt to that too. And it's not just because of the, like, Chiefs relation. Like, I kind of see those broken tackle numbers. I think he's going to be a really good player. I do worry a little bit, like I said, about the size and the frame. And then also, like, he's getting a huge workload, but he's just so freaking productive that it doesn't seem to bother him. Have you seen the Michael Myers comparison? Like, Michael Myers.
Oh, yes, dude. Where he stands up in the backfield. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Dude.
So Ashton Genty, if you ever watch Boise State, most running backs, when they're in the backfield, whether it be in the shotgun or under center, they usually stand in an athletic position where they're bending at the knees with their hands on their thighs. Ashton Genty just stands upright, just completely stoic, doesn't seem to like bend at all. And then, but the funny thing is, like, they hand him the ball and then he just like runs right through an MFer's face for like 20 yards. So like everyone says, like, he stands in the backfield like Michael Myers from Halloween. It is the Halloween season, but yes, I've enjoyed the Ashton Genty memes on Twitter for sure. Okay, so let's get in this.
Hold on. I gotta get my rank.
I didn't let you rank. Yeah, you got to rank.
Come on. Okay. I agree with exactly what you said. Like, Saquon at 1, Bijan at 2, Ashton at 3. Dude, watching him play, it's like if there was ever a player that needed to bump up to the SEC to make sure that he was like legit, it's Ashton Genty, excuse me. Because like you watch him like hit off 5 guys and then get a touchdown, and you're like, oh yeah, it's because he's playing, at Boise State. If he was doing this against SEC opponents, it'd be completely different. Then you watch him play Oregon and you're like, oh, yeah, that was a really good game for you. I would like to see it more consistently against those big opponents, but it's like, dude, in that Oregon game, he looked just as dominant as he did against.
So against the number 2 Oregon Ducks, Ashton Genty went for 25 carries, 192 yards, averaging 7.7 yards a carry for 3 touchdowns.
So pretty good.
Only 2 catches for 8 yards though. So yeah, the receiving is something that, like, I think is an emerging trait for him, but an absolute monster. And in a game there, like you brought up the level of competition there, like Boise State, there's some questions. He just did it against the number 2 country in the team who just beat Ohio State. So certified stud. Let's get into our top 25s. We're going to go 25 to 1. Christian, we'll go 5 at a time. So why don't you start with number 25 to 20 for you?
All right, so number 25, Isaiah Bond. I have him as an 84 overall in my ranking system. We talked about him a lot, so I'll kind of leave that where it is. Terriota, is that how it's pronounced? McMillan, from Arizona. 6'5" wide receiver, like really, really deceptive in an odd way is what I wrote down here in my notes. He's very much a guy who, like, he is going to telegraph his route. He's going to telegraph how he's going upfield. but he's deceptive with his speed, and not like deceptive in he has an insane amount of speed. It's like deceptive in how he changes speed. And like if you're looking at wide receiver prospects, if you're getting into like ranking these types of guys or watching film, it's like one thing for wide receivers: you can be slow, you can be fast, you can be tall, you can be short. You have to be deceptive. That's how you become a great wide receiver in the league. He has that, but again, it's like I kind of compared him to Drake London kind of, because he has that big stature and he can win those 50-50 balls, but he's like not somebody that, like, I don't know. I don't have him as high up as some of the other people here. Next one, Michael Williams, the edge from Georgia. Then I have Nick Scorton from Texas Tech, and then Tyleek Williams from Ohio State.
You hate Nick Scorton. A Nick Scorton hater. You just want to relegate this dude to the AAF. What the hell?
Dude, he's so technically sound, but like, dude, there's not very much bend there. I don't really see a whole lot of bend.
To me, in the NFL right now, these power pass rushers with hustle, like Aiden Hutchinson, rest in peace. Not really, but kind of like
might as well be.
That's really his. Like, he was never a technically sound guy. He was just big and strong and hustled and has a killer spin move, and he just spams that. Like, I don't know. That to me is just such a transferable trait. All right. So number 25 for me is the corner out of Nebraska, Tommy Hill, a converted wide receiver into corner, picked off Shadur Sanders in the big college game against Colorado and Nebraska. Really great ball skills, big physical frame. This guy wakes up and looks at pictures of Steve Spagnuolo because he's the perfect Steve Spagnuolo corner. Number 24, Siobhan Ravel, the cornerback out of East Carolina, small school guy, insane ball production. Recently tore his ACL. It's going to be interesting to see how the draft process goes for him if he's able to test. He's a guy that you didn't really get a great look at him against top-level competition. Similar projection to Quinyon Mitchell. I think if he's healthy, he's probably a top 15 pick. I think now it's a little bit more questionable for him. Number 23, I have the tight end out of Michigan, Colston Loveland. Similar profile to Dalton Kincaid. Probably one of the better pure route runners at the tight end position. I think a lot of people might have another tight end over him. He is not a bad blocker, but he's not an excellent blocker. That's not his strong set, but really good yak ability. The frame, he's young, like his frame can add some weight and I think develop into a great pass catching tight end. Number 22, I have the wide receiver from Stanford, Alec Ayumanor. This is a player, great value, Brian Thomas Jr., big, strong, down the field speed, wins at the catch point, highly productive, less developed route runner, less value or less production against top level like talent. Brian Thomas Jr. popped off, was one of the most productive wide receivers in college football last year against top level talent. Ayumanor's not quite that way, but there's a lot of things in his game that remind me of Brian Thomas, and I think like. I know some people cringe when they hear this, like MVS is kind of like the big, tall, fast guy, which has some value. Number 21, to me, the best pure tackle prospect in the class. Now I have him at 21, which tells you like I'm not still super high on him. Joshua Simmons, the offensive tackle, the left tackle from Ohio State, very technically sound, solid in pass protection, good athletic frame, an ascending player, a player who's getting better the more he plays. Really showed out well in that Oregon game. I know that game didn't necessarily go the way that Ohio State fans wanted it to, but really like him. And then at number 20, I have a run of Ohio State guys here. I've got Jack Sawyer, the edge out of Ohio State. Again, a really high floor edge rusher, got power, got hustle, got strength, a former top recruit. He's a guy that I think like sets a great edge, powerful player. He's a guy that I don't think, I'm not sure that he's going to be a double-digit sack guy in the NFL, but he can do some of the things that like a Mike Dana has done for teams. Like to me, I kind of see shades of the Bengals pass rusher, not Trey Hendrickson. What's the other guy on the other side? It'll come to me in a minute. But just a high floor edge rusher for me. Okay, so what overlap did we have? Almost none.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have Isaiah Bond a little bit higher than I think a lot of people do.
Wide receiver.
Yeah.
I that just matters. Sam Hubbard was the player, by the way, I was thinking of. Had to get it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like Bond, the speed, and like seeing like how the NFL is dealing with these too high shells, how important Yak is right now. I think that's one thing for me. And then I'm just going to give the nod to a guy who is playing in a scheme that I think like helps players develop into NFL players with Sark's defense or offense. So like also a slight nod there. And again, I think too, like this is my big board will always be geared towards the Chiefs. I see the Chiefs looking at Isaiah Bond's skill set and really liking it for their system.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can at least agree on that.
Yes, let's go. I guess this would be. Did you read your 20th player?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go 19 through 14.
All right. I have Ariante Ursay, the offensive tackle out of Minnesota. His strength is, yeah.
Around from Kansas City area.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah, I'll have to look where he went to high school, but yeah.
So my notes here, his strength really didn't match his size. Whenever I was watching him play, like he's a huge guy. When you look at him, like he's one of those guys that steps off the bus and you go, okay, we're in for a game. I mean, it almost looks like he lacks intensity at times, but he, I think he could be a good player. Possibly he comes to the Chiefs, becomes that right tackle. Wyatt Millum out of West Virginia, offensive tackle. That dude is athletic. I think he is probably the most athletic tackle in this draft class. A little too aggressive in the passing game. I see him moving forward rather than backward during these passing downs multiple times while I watched his game. He has the power to take advantage of like oversized or undersized outside linebackers and edges, but like he doesn't have the power that you would think that a guy like that would have. Next is Emory Jones, offensive tackle out of LSU. I think he's a right tackle or an interior offensive lineman player. He kind of lacks that like high ceiling that you look for in a first round offensive tackle prospect. But I mean, he's still playing. I mean, there's an argument you can make that he's the second best offensive tackle in the class. And to play on the same team with Will Campbell, from LSU, like what? Will Compton? No,
Will Compton. Chiefs Kingdom troll Will Compton. Sorry.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, he's on the brain a lot. If you're scrolling Twitter. Then my last one, Barrett Carter, linebacker out of Clemson. Dude is a rocket ship. He is incredibly fast.
I did not have a linebacker, and he's also not my linebacker one.
Oh, he's not my linebacker one either.
Oh,
I have two linebackers in the top 25, dude.
I thought you coached offense. This man's a defense hound.
Right.
By the way, Ariante Ursay, Ruskin High School here in Kansas City.
Ruskin High School.
6'6", 337 left tackle out of Ruskin. Yes, downtown Kansas City area. So this big fella, strong run blocker. Did I cut you off? Did you read all your players?
No, that was it. Just Barrett Carter. He's really, really fast. I think he's a good matchup for like tight ends, running backs out of the backfield. And if you're looking at the Chiefs defense and you say, hey, what could we get better at? We've done a little bit better job recently with it, but it's like, hey, let's watch running backs out of the backfield and let's get on tight ends. And he could absolutely do that for us. Super athletic. Like I said, just a heat-seeking missile coming towards the ball. I think he'd be perfect in the Chiefs defense.
Okay, so we'll do our best not to like overlap. We're going to have some players that we have overlap. We don't need to like double explain Emory Jones, right? So number 19 for me is Emeka Ibuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. Probably the best pure route runner in the class, honestly. We know that these Ohio State wide receivers, they come NFL ready. He is a go-to chain mover. He runs best out of the slot. We'll draw a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba comparisons, and it makes sense, right? The yak ability, his ability to win in the intermediate part of the field. I think it's just a high ceiling wide receiver prospect that a team is going to find useful in the first round. Next, I have the right tackle from LSU, Emory Jones, at number 18. Number 17, first mention of Cameron Williams, the right tackle from Texas. This guy has a big frame. He has strong, powerful hands that are like vice grips when they get on you. He is not the most fluid mover at the position. I'm not necessarily sure that this is a guy that the Chiefs will look at and say, oh, we just love this player because he's not tremendous in space, but he really can flash the ability to turn those like pass pro reps into run blocks. Like he's got really solid feet when he gets his feet chopping, or when he's got his frame set. I think the rep is over. It honestly kind of reminds me a little bit of Orlando Brown, where like Orlando Brown, he was either winning or losing. When he got his paws on you, he got his foundation set, the rep was over because of his big strength. That's Cameron Williams, the right tackle out of Texas. At number 16, I have LT Overton, the edge from Alabama, a recent riser. I think again, the power profile for him does a lot of things that some of the like Chris Braswell did, who was from Alabama last year, kind of a similar prospect. He's a guy that I think is rising up boards, been productive. You just like the SEC ability there. Number 15, I have Michael Williams, the edge from Georgia. We already talked about him, or you've already listed him, right?
Yeah, but I didn't go into depth at all. I just listed his name.
Yeah, he's just like traitsy as hell. Trayvon Walker's the cop there. We've talked about him a little bit on the show. Traitsy as hell. Not a ton of productivity, but just speed, bend, length, everything that you want from an edge rusher prospect. Just lacking that productivity. Okay, so let's go your 14 through 9. 14 through 9. We'll do 14 through 9.
Yeah. So I have Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame.
Hey, we have our first true. Well, you have them at the same spot. That's where I have Benjamin Morrison. Also noteworthy, Benjamin Morrison had season-ending knee surgery a week or two ago. So he's another guy even more than Siobhan Ravel that I think will be really interesting. By the way, Siobhan Ravel, Benjamin Morrison, if they're available at pick 32, auto draft for the Chiefs, by the way.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Oh my God. I'm literally just about to talk about Siobhan. I have him up pretty high.
Yeah. Benjamin Morrison's just so technically sound. Honestly, yes. Trent McDuffie where he just doesn't lose reps because of his technical ability. He's not the twitchiest athlete. There's a twitchier guy up here at the top, but just really technically sound, mirroring, matching, doesn't lose in man, doesn't lose in zone.
Yeah, well, and he's you talked about the technical aspect. He's I kind of almost want him to be a little bit handsier, but he loses so few reps that you're well, I mean, I guess do whatever you want, man. He flips his hips fluidly. He takes wide receivers deep downfield. He has good speed. He can blitz off the edge. It's oh yeah, Steve Spagnuolo, cornerback. Yes. So again, yeah, auto draft if he's available. Jahdae Barron, the safety out of, I actually don't have his Texas. Okay, yes. He's kind of this hybrid nickel safety that can kind of play that Shamari Connor role.
Yes,
Jalen Petrie.
Yeah, he's my comp for him. Jalen Petrie. I really like him.
But he's another guy that would be just perfect if we didn't have three safeties already on the roster that are pretty good, or somebody who can run that nickel role. Who was that guy that the Bengals drafted a few years ago? Dax Hill. That was another guy that I looked at him and I was he's kind of rangy like that, right? Where he can kind of play all over the middle of the field. And so if you like Dax Hill, I think you'll really, really like Jahdae Barron. Abdul Carter is my next player, edge out of Penn State. He's kind of like Michael Williams, where he's just insanely athletic. He's a little bit skinnier, and he's more of an outside linebacker, 3-4 defensive player. It's but he's just so who was that guy? Georgia. I should have his name written down over here somewhere. They drafted him. The Eagles drafted him. What?
Oh. Not Hassan Reddick. It's the other guy.
Something Smith.
Yeah.
I'm losing. Anyway,
Nolan Smith.
Nolan Smith. Yes, Nolan Smith. Yeah. He's that type of player where it's I'm just going to beat you with my physical traits, and that Nick Bonito build where it's I'm probably a designated pass rusher. I don't have Abdul Carter in my top 25. I can't get the Chop Robinson comp out of my head. So a lot of people are going to see him wearing 11 and just think Micah Parsons, but the 6'3", 262, just, I don't know.
I just can't do it with Penn State edge rushers. Like I don't think that they set a quality enough edge to be a Spagnuolo guy.
Yeah, well, and yeah, if anybody's comparing him to Micah Parsons, they are not watching film. They're reading the ESPN top 25 highlights. Like,
yes, yeah.
He is by no means a Micah Parsons that you can line up at edge. He's like a designated blitzer or 3-4 defensive end. Like, yeah. Anyway, James Pierce, defensive line. This is one of my guys from Tennessee. He's not really a Spags type of defensive end, but like, oh my God, is he athletic? Like he can win with power and speed. He's like a chess piece that you can utilize him all over the defense. He's kind of had a slow start this year, but like he is just so important to that Tennessee defense that you have to respect how he's going to be utilized and how he can kind of lead a room. But dude, if there was like, I know, again, he's not a Spags guy at all, but whichever team he goes to is going to be getting an insane player. James Pierce Jr. is a great player. My last one that I have here, Shavon Revel Jr. Out of East Carolina, defensive back. I mean, he's exactly like whenever I'm teaching defensive backs, like that's whose film I'm going to point to. It's like be physical, be aggressive, get interceptions. Play all over the field. He's kind of like, he's got that mentality of like a press corner. But he hasn't really played a whole lot of guys that you look at and they're like first round draft pick wide receiver.
There was I'm trying to remember who the player is, a wide receiver from UTSA that was going to be kind of a circle and an ink matchup for him. And he just didn't get to play with them before he got injured. But yeah, I mean, I think the level of competition with him, it's just the ball productivity is so high. I brought up Quinion Mitchell because he was the same type of way. Toledo, Eastern Carolina, kind of that same tier. But the traits, the way coaches talk about him too, just appears to be like a real stand-up clubhouse type of guy where everyone in the locker room loves him. So yeah, he's traitsy as hell. And I still think he's a first round talent.
Yeah.
Okay. So we said 14, Benjamin Morrison, the outside corner from Notre Dame. Number 13, first mention of Deion Walker, the interior defensive lineman from Kentucky, a certified dick wrecker. Is Deion Walker. Okay. You watch the Georgia game and like Georgia almost lost to Kentucky and Deion Walker's a part of it. Honestly, like close your eyes, squint a little bit, Jalen Carter. That's what I see. I don't think that he's going to be quite that level of player. There's some questions as like, you know, how much he can stay on the field, but this is that true interior defensive line prospect. We've got two more here. This is a very talented interior defensive line class where like, okay, we start with the two gapping run stuffer, but then the ability to wreck games from the interior as a pass rusher. Almost all these guys, we can kind of copy and paste the same thing, minus Mason Graham, who we'll mention here in a little bit. But just like good power, bull rush speed to be able to win on the inside. Still need some pass rush development, but like I said, game wrecker. Number 12, Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver from Texas. Speed, yak ability, short area quickness. Number 11, Kelvin Banks, the left tackle from Texas. And number 10, the first mention of Kenneth Grant, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. He's the other interior defensive lineman from Michigan. He is more of your traditional, like, he's not quite as big as Tavondre Sweat, but that's more of the profile for him where it's like, not Jalen Carter, who's the other freakish interior defensive lineman from Georgia that got drafted a couple years ago to come to me. But he, you know, pass rush upside, it's a development there, but this is a guy that you go and you stick him next to your Chris Jones, like DJ Reader, and he's just going to wreck interior run games. He's a guy that you're going to have four hands at all time in the run game. And then developing that pass rush ability for him is going to be key to, you know, just how high his ceiling is. Obviously, we're talking about Michigan. Massey Smith would be another guy to kind of compare him to, though that has not necessarily gone well. Jordan Davis was the player I'm thinking about, like a true nose tackle. Also on the Eagles, because all they do is draft Georgia players. So he is my number 10 player. Did you read your number 9? You read your number 9, right?
Yeah.
Okay, number 9, Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State. We've already sang his praises a lot. He's a top 10 talent in this class. There's not really any debate about that. He's an incredible player in a class that's pretty shallow at top end talent. So I've got him at number 9.
Okay. Harold Perkins Jr. is my next player. Linebacker out of LSU. again, you're looking at the Chiefs defense and you're looking at what we could possibly need. He fills an instant hole in the roster. He is what you wish. Why am I blanking on his name? The Chargers linebacker we just got.
Drew Tranquil?
Drew Tranquil. Yes. Oh my goodness. He is what you would like for him to be, where he's got that like Willie Gay athleticism, but he's still pretty good in coverage. Kind of lacks in the run game. You're not going to use him as like that Willie Gay traditional role of like just go like read the offensive linemen, see where they're going, and then just pull. And he sometimes gets caught peeking in the backfield when he's out in coverage. Like he will look back there and see if he can come up and make a play. You see that a lot with really young players. Harold Perkins has kind of got that mentality to him. Luther Burden, my next player, wide receiver from Mizzou. This is like the perfect Chiefs wide receiver. This is like exactly what they go for. Yak ability, guy who can get open downfield. He came in as a 5-star recruit, and I'll even use my homerism a little bit for Mizzou. Dude, he's just been an all-star since he got there. He walked in day one. He knew he was going to be the best wide receiver there. He was. He came in. He made fantastic play after fantastic play. Let's see. The jet sweeps, man. Like he gets used in jet sweeps, out-breaking routes, in the run game. Like you saw that with the UMass game recently. But he's not a contested catch guy, which if you know in the Andy Reid offense, like we're not going to utilize that anyway. So Luther Burden's there. Trade up, get him, do whatever you have to. JT,
your unbiased opinion.
Yes, from a Mizzou alum. JT Tuamalo, how do you pronounce his last name? Maloau. The edge player out of Ohio State. This is
Oregon was attacking his ass. They were giving him the Nick Bosa treatment.
Yes,
the Chiefs
they were.
give Nick Bosa. They were attacking his ass off the edge.
Oh my God. But he's like the perfect Spags defensive end. Like he very active hands, great power, assignment sound. Like he is a better version of like Mike Dana and George Karlaftis. I don't know if he's got George Karlaftis' upside, but he's that player that's like, hey, I know where I'm supposed to be, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be pretty damn good at whatever you tell me I need to do. That game against Penn State was by far the best play, the best game that I watched of him so far. Dude is an absolute monster. Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. He had one play that I think really like kind of sums him up. He had, I don't know if you were watching the Texas game, where he had this insane hustle tackle. He's got above average size, above average speed. He's just one of those players that you look at and it's like, you don't want to say can't miss because, you know, depending on where you go and what type of system you get in, it's like, you know, anybody can miss. But he's one of the guys where you're like, dude, he's got the hustle. He's got the physical traits. Like he might be not as technically sound as some of the other cornerbacks that we're going to talk about. But like, dude, he just is a great player. He's part of a Michigan defense. You just know he's going to be good. Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan as well. He looks like a freaking wide receiver when he's coming off the ball, dude. Like some of the releases that he has to get like past those offensive linemen look wide receiver like great quickness, great footwork. You hate to compare him to Aaron Donald, but he has some of that like, oh, like what a quick first step. That's like, you don't see that. That's Chris Jones. That's Aaron Donald. Then lastly, I have Travis Hunter. He's my cornerback wide receiver. I have him more as a wide receiver just because I think that he can be utilized that way a little bit more in the NFL. He's had some not great reps at cornerback that I think you love his mentality. You hate to see like a player like that, especially at the cornerback and wide receiver position that doesn't have a mentality like that. But I think that can kind of hold him back. He plays a little bit less, more aggressive than he should at times. And at wide receiver, you can be as aggressive as you want, man. Throw the ball over the middle, try to break 10 tackles. Like do you, man. Try to beat this guy on a release. He has the mentality to be like an insane wide receiver.
Okay. All right. Malachi Starks is my number 8 player, the safety out of Georgia. One of the best pure players in this class. Might be the best safety prospect we've seen since Derwin James. Maybe Brian Branch. I'm not sure that he's going to run out of the slot like Branch can, but just a really good all-around football player. Can win deep down the field, can win in coverage, can run he basically shut out Luther Burden in that Georgia game. He has been used in assignment specific roles. And speaking of, at number 7, I have the wide receiver out of Missouri, Luther Burden. You mentioned his ability. Yak, I see DJ Moore. I see Jamar Chase in him. Not the most refined route runner as maybe Chase was coming out, but extremely high floor as a player. Number 6, I have the edge rusher out of Texas A&M via Purdue, former teammate of George Karlaftis, Nick Scorton, just a full, powerful, length hustle player that I think will just make so much sense. And I came armed for this next one. At number 5, my number 1 overall wide receiver, Terriota McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. I knew that this would make you mad that I had him as my number 1 wide receiver. I just think he's the size. Like, to me, I had Burden over McMillan to start the season, but McMillan has surprised me with his athleticism and run after the catch this year. And just one other thing, Burden stacks stats against lower level teams, and then when he comes to the big games, he has a propensity to kind of disappear into big games. 6 for 55 against Arkansas, 3 for 53 against Georgia, 2 for 15 against Kentucky. Then here comes the soft Florida team, 9 for 158. Kansas State, probably his best game, 7 for 114. Louisiana State, 149. Memphis, 177. Middle Tennessee State, 117. Then Ohio State, 3 for 15. Tennessee, 4 for 26. Just like, and I think like McMillan, the frame is just something that he's a little bit bigger, about 3 or 4 inches bigger, probably about 10, 15 pounds more heavy. I think some teams, I see like Mike Evans when I see McMillan, and I think that is just a little bit more transferable over team to team. Number 4, the left tackle from LSU, Will Campbell. Number 3, the cornerback from Michigan, Will Johnson. Number 2, Mason Graham, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. And my number 1 overall player, just as yours, is Travis Hunter. I think that he's just making such a case for himself as a corner and a wide receiver. The big step for him this year has come at wide receiver, where he's really grown. I just think the versatility and the high potential as a corner, I think that it's hard to find a player that you can say is better than him in this draft.
Oh, Travis Hunter is my 6th overall pick. I still
really?
have 5
Okay.
more.
Okay, go with your last 5.
Okay, well, I won't make this a Brady Cook conversation and why Luther Burden isn't good at big games, but we can move on to Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. That's going to be a surprise to a lot of people. But like, dude, if Ashton Jeanty wasn't, if Ashton Jeanty wasn't turning it up,
little Shady McCoy to his game.
Yes, yeah, and you see a little bit of Saquon in him too, where he's got like that oh no, oh yes ability. Then I have Ashton Jeanty, Boise State running back, averaging 10 yards a carry, man. Like he's going to be an all-star. At some point, you have to give credit where credit's due. Then I have Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle for Texas. Dude, he's just, we talked about him a lot. He's going to be a good player. Number 2, Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. Like you said it, man, like Derwin James is the only guy I can think about that has a resume as good as Malachi Starks. He's just a fantastic player. I would love to see him in a Chiefs uniform. Will not happen. He will not make it out of the top 7 or 8 picks. And then number 1, Will Campbell, LSU. There are some concerns. It's like, but again, he's got everything you want in an offensive tackle. He's got the resume. He's doing it at the highest level. He's doing it in the best conference. It's like, just give the man his flowers, man. He's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick. He's at a high level or a high need position for a lot of teams. He's not this year's Joe Alt, because I think Joe Alt was a much better player than him, but he is that type of guy in the context of this draft.
Okay. Well, we will both have our top 25s written up on the website here shortly that you can follow along with as we go through the draft season. Right now, pinned to my Twitter profile, I have my preseason top 25. I'll make some adjustments. Christian, do you have some my guys that you want to share real quickly? Because we want to get everyone out here at somewhat of a decent time.
Honestly, I mean, there are really just 2 that I really, really like. That's Omarion Hampton. You probably realize that having him at my number 5 spot, but like him, Luther Burden, obviously, and then Shavon Revel, all fantastic players. I love the mentality of all of them. Maybe a homer pick for Luther Burden, but he's still a great player.
Good player, yeah. Here's some 3 my guys that I had that I didn't list here. I'm just going to rapid fire these guys. Nash Hutchmaker, the interior defensive lineman out of Nebraska. Go Big Red. He's a 6'4", 310-pound interior defensive lineman, a champion high school wrestler with a 4-time state championship, 4-time state champion, undefeated, 166-0 in competition in the state of North Dakota. He continues to wrestle for the Cornhuskers at the collegiate level, plays a true nose guard in the 3-3-5 scheme that Nebraska has. He's a space-eating 2-gapper with surprising burst and good hustle. He's your Derek Nottie replacement. Him and Ty Robinson, 2 really good interior defensive linemen for Nebraska. They're a big part of what's kind of helped that defense be resurgent. Teams are going to love the wrestling background on him, and it shows in the trenches. He knows how to use leverage and power. Another guy, Gabe Jackus, the edge out of Illinois, is a 6'3", 275. Again, ding, 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 2-time state champion wrestler, rated on the Bruce Feldman's Freaks list at number 67 on the list. He has 3 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss in 6 games. Tons of tools can be lined up in numerous places from inside, outside, even stand up. Solid run defense, high motor pass rusher. Won't turn 21 until after he's drafted. Not overly productive. Not a huge arsenal of pass rush moves, but the raw traits are there. I really like Gabe Jackus. He flashed against my Cornhuskers, unfortunately, as they lost to Illinois in that game, but just traitsy as hell. He kind of reminds me of like Boye Mafe, different traits, but kind of like that, like 2nd round pass rusher. Number 3, your Rashee Rice replacement. He's here. His name is Trey Harris, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. He is going to be a riser in this draft. He's 6'2", 210 pounds, formerly of Louisiana Tech, a versatile pass catcher that can align across all across the offense, wins with yak ability and at the catch point. Similar profile to, like I said, Rashee Rice. Has already set a career high in yards and touchdown, which, oh, by the way, he leads all FBS in yards and touchdowns. He's not the most technical route runner, but he doesn't have like true long speed, but this guy can run after the catch, break tackles, win at the catch point. Let me read to you his last 5 games. 7 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown. 3 receptions for 81 yards, no touchdowns. 11 receptions for 176 yards and a touchdown. 11 receptions for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. 10 for 94 against Wake Forest. He is a stud. I love all 3 of these guys. They are certified my guys. Nash Hutchmaker, Gabe Jackus, Trey Harris. Christian, I have one last question for you before we get out of here. Fill in the blank. With the 32nd pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select
Omari Hampton, running back, North Carolina.
You want to watch the city burn, you son of a bitch.
Dude, he's just so good, man. He's been
For
perfect.
Me, he really would. And this might be a year to draft a running back, but they're not ready for that conversation. Okay, with the 32nd overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select interior defensive lineman out of Cincinnati, Dante Corleone, the Godfather. Just a space eater, a monster in the trenches. By the way, he has not played most of the season. He's playing now because of blood clots in his lungs. Ding, ding, ding. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that's the same thing that Trey Smith has, and the Chiefs are going to know how to manage that. He's a first-round talent. I think he's going to kick ass next to Chris Jones. Reminds me a little bit of Clyde Jacansey, but he's bigger, but just freakish ability on the inside. This is the way to soup up that interior defensive line. So Dante Corleone, the Godfather, coming to Kansas City. That's going to do it all for us on this draft special episode of the Intangibles. Make sure you're listening to all of our shows. We'll be talking a lot of draft, but we'll also be talking about those Kansas City Chiefies. Don't worry, we didn't forget. We'll be back. We'll be talking about them. Huge game over the 49ers. The OG Hour was yesterday or today, whenever you're listening. It comes out on Friday, but it was recorded today. So tune in there for all your pregame needs. Good news about this episode, it's evergreen. So if you want to come back, listen to a little bit of draft content, we'll be here for when you need us. We're here for you. We know you have draft needs, and we'll wait for you, okay? We will wait for you. That's going to do it for us today. We're going to call that a show. This is Christian Ainsworth. I am Price Carter. We want to thank producer Richard, who hopefully was able to stay awake through all this draft conversation. I know he's just riveted by our draft conversation. Smash like, hit subscribe, and as always, go Chiefs.